Hello, everyone. I've got a crazy murder case to go over with you all today. However, this is no normal murder case by any means and goes off the rails at a point. You'll understand what I mean by that at the end of this video, considering I'm going to speak about things the keepers did not. With that being said, let's get right into it. In 1969, something sinister was going on at Baltimore's all girl Archbishop Keogh High School. Many of the students knew what was happening inside the chaplain's office, but they didn't dare talk about it openly. Every time the announcement blared from the loudspeaker for so and so to report to the chaplain, classrooms fell silent as girl after girl reported for what was usually referred to as counseling. One girl was so terrified she tried to hide in the stairwell. It wasn't long before Father Neil Magnus found her huddled in a corner and escorted her to the office of Father Joseph Maskell. And when the door clicked shut, the abuse began. The nuns who ran the school, as both teachers and administrators most likely knew, or at least strongly suspected Father Maskell and Father Magnus were essaying students at Archbishop Keogh, but they were all too afraid to speak up. All but one, that is, 26-year-old Sister Kathy Cesnik, stood out among the nuns at the school. She was young, beautiful, kind, and above all, she was compassionate. Students gravitated toward her because she made them feel like they mattered, and to Sister Kathy, they did matter, every last one of them. So, when one of her students very reluctantly revealed that the two priests at the school were essaying her, Sister Kathy decided that something needed to be done. She looked the girl in the eye and told her, "I'm going to take care of this." 7 months later, Sister Kathy turned up dead. This is the story of the murder of Sister Kathy Cesnik and how her case played a part in exposing 156 Baltimore priests as PDF files. If you've already seen The Keepers, the 2017 Netflix docuseries, you know all about Sister Kathy's story, but in this video, we'll also be looking at the jaw-dropping Maryland Attorney General's report on SA and Baltimore's Catholic churches, which was released in 2023. It includes details on priests who were not seen in The Keepers, but were directly connected to one key figure in the docuseries. Before getting into the details of Sister Kathy's murder, it is important to understand exactly what was happening at Archbishop Keogh High School and put the time period into perspective. 1969 was the year of Woodstock, Easy Rider, and the moon landing. It was also one of several years during which Archbishop Keogh High School had not one, but two predators on its staff. One of them was Father Neil Magnus. What Father Magnus did to students at Archbishop Keogh is described in excruciating detail by the victims themselves in the Keepers Netflix docuseries, but for those who haven't seen it, Father Magnus was, to put it mildly, a monster in priest clothing. The same is true about Father Joseph Maskell. Magnus and Maskell were both in the habit of drugging their victims and would use Catholicism as a weapon to coerce and control the girls at Keogh. In fact, the AG report affirms that this was a common tactic among many of the accused Baltimore priests. They would tell their victims that the abuse was God's will, that God would not mind. And this last quote is particularly disgusting, which goes as follows: "If you do this, you'll be closer to God." What Magnus and Maskell told Keogh students was disgusting, atrocious, and offensive. Many priests also warned their victims that there would be grave consequences for telling their parents about the abuse. One priest threatened a boy with castration. Another threatened an eternity in hell for the victim and the victim's family. Maskell himself allegedly told girls that their parents would lose their jobs and the girls would be sent to foster homes. Following the pattern that is seen in many clergy SA cases, Magnus and Maskell carefully identified the most vulnerable students at Keogh. They targeted children who lacked confidence, children who had been abused before, and children who were especially devoted to the church. The two priests at Archbishop Keogh subjected the girls to other SA that will not be described here, and based on numbers alone, Maskell was by far the worst of the two offenders. To date, Maskell has been accused by at least 39 victims. Many were Keogh students. As the school's chaplain and counselor, Maskell was in a position to call students to his office on any day, at any time, and nobody would question why his office was located in a far corner of the school. Conveniently, his office had a door to the outside through which Maskell's PDF file friends could quietly enter and exit. Victims at Keogh were essayed by not only Maskell and Magnus, but other men as well. The other men included police officers, priests from local parishes, and other members of the community. The girls had grown up believing they should trust and obey. Maskell, Magnus, and their CA buddies brazenly essayed girl after girl with impunity. Like many nuns at Archbishop Keogh, Sister Kathy strongly suspected that girls were being essayed at the school, but she couldn't make accusations on a hunch. However, one of her students came forward and reluctantly let Sister Kathy know that she was being abused by the priest and gave Cesnik something to go on. It is unknown exactly what Sister Kathy did next. Did she launch her own investigation, questioning other girls at the school? Did she directly confront Father Magnus and Father Maskell? Did she go straight to the Archdiocese of Baltimore and demand action? Nobody really knows, or at least nobody is willing to say, but word had somehow gotten back to Father Maskell that at least one girl was talking. It's unclear whether he knew who was talking or just strongly suspected them, but he confronted one student in a way that scared her into silence. For over 20 years, the girl was legitimately afraid that Maskell would kill her. By the fall semester of 1969, Sister Kathy and her good friend, Sister Russell Phillips, had left Archbishop Keogh to teach in Baltimore's public school system. They were still nuns and still part of their order, but had moved into an apartment together. It is believed that their departure likely had something to do with the essay taking place at the school, but the public reason given was that the nuns were doing some sort of experimental work by going outside of the archdiocese. On the night of Friday, November 7th, 1969, Sister Kathy Cesnik had some errands to run. She needed to stop at the bank, pick up some buns at the local bakery, and then she was going to buy a gift for her sister who had recently gotten engaged. Sister Kathy left her home at the Carriage House Apartments at about 7 p.m. and drove to the Edmondson Village Shopping Center in Baltimore. Later that night, the nun's roommate, Sister Russell, was starting to get worried. It was approaching midnight, and Sister Kathy hadn't made it home. Sister Russell called the police shortly before 1 a.m. to report Cesnik missing. Sister Russell also called two good friends that night, Father Peter McKeon and Father Gerard J. Koob. The two men had gone to the apartment to be supportive and talk things through with Sister Russell. Much has been said of Koob's relationship with Sister Kathy. The two were allegedly dating at the time, but the nun and the reverend were not sexually involved. After the police had come and gone, McKeon and Koob stepped outside for a short walk. It was the middle of the night, just past 4 a.m., and the two men spotted something strange. It was Sister Kathy's car, a green 1969 Ford Maverick, and it was parked on a side street across from the carriage house parking lot, with its rear blocking the sidewalk and jutting out into the street. The tires were muddy, the doors were unlocked, and there was a twig hanging from the turn signal. Koob described the twig as having been tied to the turn signal as if someone had put it there intentionally. It seemed highly unlikely that Sister Kathy had parked this car herself. There was no way she would have parked so carelessly across the street from the carriage house parking lot, where she always parked her car, and she would have certainly locked the doors. Sister Kathy had left the carriage house apartments alone in her car, but it appeared that someone else had brought the car back. Authorities quickly assembled search teams to look for the missing nun. 35 police officers and 5 search dogs covered every inch of a 14-block area of southwest Baltimore. Officers knocked on doors, checked alleyways, and searched the surrounding buildings in the area. The search went on for 3 days, but there was no sign of Sister Kathy anywhere. With very little to go on, police were quickly heading toward a dead end less than a week into the investigation. Within days of Sister Kathy going missing, news of another young woman's disappearance began appearing alongside news relating to Cesnik. The disappearance of 20-year-old Joyce Malecki shared some similarities with Cesnik's case. Both women were young and beautiful. Both had gone out shopping before they vanished. Both drove cars that were found unlocked and abandoned in unusual places, with Malecki's car being found near a payphone and a gas station parking lot, and both women were found dead in obscure locations. The body of Joyce Malecki was found just 2 days after she went missing. She was discovered face down in the Little Pent River near Fort Meade, which is an Army base located about 30 minutes south of Baltimore. She was fully clothed with her hands tied behind her back. The young woman had been strangled to death. Sister Kathy's remains would not be located until January 3rd, nearly 2 months after she disappeared. A father and son came across her badly decomposed body in what was widely reported to be a trash dump. The nun's body was only partially clothed, suggesting that she may have been essayed. A medical examiner determined that she had been choked and hit in the head with a blunt object. Police were quick to dismiss any link between the Malecki case and that of Sister Kathy. The two women did not appear to have ever met, and they had no mutual friends that anyone knew of. But unbeknownst to police at the time, Joyce and Sister Kathy did have one mutual acquaintance that would raise questions 48 years later. That acquaintance was Father Joseph Maskell. Malecki's family once attended St. Clement's Church, where Maskell was an assistant pastor before he got transferred to Archbishop Keogh. So, it is entirely possible that Joyce Malecki was acquainted with Father Joseph Maskell. The murders of both Sister Kathy Cesnik and Joyce Malecki have since gone unsolved. As decades passed, it seemed as though everyone had forgotten all about the murder of Sister Kathy and the years of horrifying abuse that had taken place at Archbishop Keogh High School. However, in 1992, a 41-year-old woman came forward with bombshell allegations of SA that not only named her abusers, but also directly implicated Maskell in the murder of Sister Kathy Cesnik as well. This woman was a student at the high school in 1969. Jean Wayner, the girl who had been threatened by Father Maskell all those years before and had told Sister Kathy about the abuse. These allegations in 1992 received little to no attention in the press, but when a $40 million lawsuit was filed against the Archdiocese of Baltimore in 1994, Maskell was suddenly making headlines. The 55-year-old priest maintained his innocence and said, "I was in shock. I never had relations with a kid." Friends also came to his defense. Retired Baltimore County Police Captain James Skell, who made an appearance in the Netflix docuseries, spoke of how Maskell had baptized his children, how his children liked the priest, and how Skell, being a cop, would have noticed if Maskell was a criminal. His logic being that police would have noticed, as if they had some kind of spidey sense, and bells would have started ringing. A Baltimore city councilman called Maskell a priest's priest, which probably sounded like a compliment at the time, but in retrospect, that was an extremely poor choice of words. Reverend Robert Hawkins called the accusations against Maskell absurd, saying he was a fine man, and Atia Marasa, who worked at Archbishop Keogh during Maskell's reign of terror, was resolute in her defense of the disgraced priest, saying, "I think Father Maskell is above reproach and an upstanding priest. All this crap that's coming out about priests is just to get money from the Catholic Church. If that happened to me, it would have been reported at once, and you can bet on that. I would have gone to the Archdiocese right away, not wait 25 years. The girls should have told their parents immediately, gotten a lawyer, and reported to the Archdiocese." Maskell had his defenders, but that handful of voices was quickly drowned out by the growing number of former Keogh students who were coming forward. And the cold case of Sister Kathy, the nun who may have died trying to stop Maskell, was once again in the public eye. Despite the renewed attention from police and new tips being called in, the murder of Sister Kathy would continue to remain a mystery. Jean Wayner, who had confided in Sister Kathy all those years earlier, did in 1994 publicly tell her story of how she knew Father Maskell was somehow involved in Sister Kathy's murder. Wayner described how Maskell took her to see Sister Kathy's dead body and how he said she'd better keep quiet about what he was doing to her behind closed doors. The implication being that she would also end up dead if she didn't keep her mouth shut, but the allegation alone wasn't enough to arrest the priest for murder. There were also allegations of a police cover up, stating Maskell had been inviting officers to his office at Archbishop Keogh High School to participate in SAing the students 25 years later. It's quite possible some of those officers may have risen through the ranks and by 1994 were in a position of power to make sure that any new evidence that was unearthed would never see the light of day. By 2012, a small grassroots investigation into Sister Kathy's murder had begun, led by a trio of determined retirees: journalist Tom Nent, nurse Abby Shaw, and teacher Gemma Hoskins. Shaw and Hoskins, former Archbishop Keogh students themselves, remember Sister Kathy with great fondness, and they both serve a major role in the Keepers as guides into that tragically dark era at Archbishop Keogh. A little over a year after The Keepers was released on Netflix in May of 2017, a scathing grand jury report identified 301 priests who had victimized over 1,000 children in Maryland and Pennsylvania. The report describes the actions of the Archdiocese of Baltimore with stunning accuracies. The report detailed what one newspaper called a blueprint for cover-up. The report described 7 tried and true church strategies for sweeping clergy SA under the rug. The 7 strategies, paraphrased by law enforcement and written from the perspective of the church, are as follows. First, make sure to use euphemisms rather than real words to describe SA. And in official archdiocese documents, never say the R word, say inappropriate contact or boundary issues. Second, don't conduct genuine investigations with properly trained personnel. Instead, assign fellow clergy members to ask inadequate questions, then make credibility determinations about the colleagues with whom they live and work. Third, for an appearance of integrity, send priests for evaluation at church run psychiatric treatment centers, and allow those experts to determine if the priest is a PDF file based largely on the priest's self reports, regardless of whether the priest had actually engaged in inappropriate contact with the child or not. Fourth, when a priest does have to be removed, don't say why. Tell his parishioners that he is on sick leave or suffering from nervous exhaustion. Either that or say nothing at all. Fifth, even if a priest is essaying children, keep providing him housing and living expenses, even if he may be using these resources to facilitate more assaults. Sixth, if a predator's conduct becomes known to the community, don't remove him from the priesthood to ensure that no more children will be victimized. Instead, transfer him to a new location where no one will know he is a CA. Finally, and above all, don't tell the police about CSA. Even short of actual penetration is and has been, for all relevant times, a crime. Don't treat it that way, though. Handle it like a personnel matter in house. While the murder of Sister Kathy wasn't directly responsible for the state of Maryland publishing its own report on SA in the church, it certainly set the stage by inspiring a docuseries that has now been seen by millions. In 2024 alone, over 6 years after the docuseries was released, The Keepers was streamed roughly 1.2 million times on Netflix. The Pennsylvania grand jury report was released in August of 2018, and almost immediately, the Maryland Attorney General's office was asking the public for reports of abuse that were associated with schools or places of worship. To no one's surprise, completing the investigation and releasing the report took much longer than expected. It was originally supposed to include churches from 3 different regions, but it ended up focusing entirely on the Archdiocese of Baltimore. When that report finally dropped in 2023, it spanned 80 years of abuse, torture, and cover ups, nearly all of which followed the Pennsylvania blueprint to the letter. Following is a brief overview taken directly from the Maryland Attorney General's report. The sheer number of abusers and victims, the depravity of the abuser's conduct, and the frequency with which known abusers were given the opportunity to continuously prey upon children are astonishing. Over 600 children are known to have been abused by the 156 people included in that report. However, the number is likely far greater. The ways abusers preyed upon their victims varied widely, but they all took advantage of the position of authority and respect afforded to priests and other clergy in the Catholic community. The duration and scope of the abuse perpetrated by Catholic clergy was made possible by the complicity of those charged with leading the church and protecting its faithful. They focused not on protecting victims or stopping the abuse, but rather on ensuring the abuse was kept hidden at all costs. It's not really practical for this video to discuss all 156 priests and other clergy members in the AG report. So let's take a brief look at the ones who have direct ties to Father Maskell. There are 7 of them. One is Father Magnus, and his crimes are well documented in The Keepers. Considering that, I think we can leave his story for the docuseries to tell. In 1997, a woman reported that she had been essayed by Father Joseph Garrick between 1967 and 1972. The woman was a teenager at the time, and she did report the abuse to multiple people. Unfortunately, in a stroke of horrible, ironic luck, 2 of the people she reported the abuse to were Father Maskell and Father Magnus, suggesting that this girl may have been a student at Keough. The part of Father Garrick's report that deals with Maskell and Magnus is partially redacted, so it's hard to say what went on there. But as we know, other priests were frequently invited to the chaplain's office at Keough, and Garrick may have been one of them. However, the AG report does not state that Garrick was accused of assaulting any Keough students. Father William Sims is accused of essaying little boys, many being altar boys, and it spanned across decades, dating back to the 1950s while he was still in seminary studying to become a priest. That should have been a red flag that maybe this guy shouldn't have been allowed into the priesthood, but he was, and unfortunately, many children paid the price. The link between Sims and Maskell in 1969 is a bit indirect, but I think it's very much worth mentioning that Sims was a chaplain for the Baltimore County Police and Fire Departments around the same time that Maskell held similar positions with the Baltimore Police. And seeing from the AG report how these predators managed to find each other and victimize children together, it is entirely likely that Sims and Maskell were aware of their shared interests. The AG report states that Sims maintained contact with other S abusers in the Archdiocese, although Maskell is not named as one of them. Sims did live with Maskell, though, and fellow SO Father John Carney in the 1980s. Also, in a strange twist of fate, a man who reported abuse in 2002 initially believed that he had been abused by Sims in 1957 at a church summer camp, but then the man concluded that it was actually Maskell who had abused him. One of the other priests connected to Maskell is Father John Joseph Mike. Based on his assignment history, this CM seems unlikely to have had any involvement in the abuse at Archbishop Keogh, but he was known to Maskell in the 1980s. Father Mike had been torturing and essaying young boys, and Maskell was apparently Father Mike's counselor, which is also oddly ironic. As Father Mike's counselor, Maskell was aware of at least one victim of Father Mike's. Regardless, in keeping with the Pennsylvania Church blueprint, Maskell didn't report the abuse and told the archdiocese that what Mike did to that teenage boy was an isolated incident, which it most certainly was not. Father Mike was then transferred to a new parish in 1988. The Archdiocese of Baltimore continued to follow the Pennsylvania blueprint perfectly by placing Father Mike on extended leave of absence, during which he would continue to receive a salary along with a car and health insurance coverage. Father Maskell left Archbishop Keogh High School in 1975 and was succeeded as chaplain by another PDF file, Father Brian Cox. Cox is one of just a handful of the 156 offenders in the AG report who actually served time in prison. He spent 9 months behind bars after essaying multiple young boys, mostly in the 1980s. However, the fact that he started working at Keogh around the time that Maskell left means that they could have known each other in '69 when Sister Kathy was murdered and the students of Keogh were regularly being abused. According to the AG report, Cox had a preference for boys. However, that doesn't automatically mean that he never abused any girls. Father Maskell had been abusing boys at Sacred Heart of Mary, St. Clement, and Our Lady of Victory, which is what led to him being transferred to Archbishop Keogh. Father John Peacock was a pastor at Our Lady of Victory from 1952 to 1973, a period during which Father Maskell also served at that parish. For about 2 years, Peacock was accused of abusing a fourth grade girl at Our Lady of Victory in the 1960s. The victim believes that other priests were involved as well. In 1960s, one of them being none other than Father John Carney, who served at Our Lady of Victory throughout most of the 60s and 70s. Remember, John Carney is also the one who was roommates with Sims and Maskell. Maskell would later victimize this girl when she was a student at Keogh. Finally, we have Father John Carney. From 1968 to 1970, Carney and Maskell were both assigned to Our Lady of Victory, right around the time that Maskell would be transferred to Archbishop Keogh. Carney had actually been a teacher at Keogh in 1965 when the school first opened. There's no word on why he left. However, the AG report does say that a woman reported that Carney was present on at least one occasion when Maskell was essaying her. This indicates that Carney was almost certainly one of the priests Maskell had invited to his office at Keogh, and on top of that, Carney and Maskell were apparently very good friends. They were such good friends, in fact, that after Weiner came forward in 1992 to report the abuse Maskell had subjected her to, Carney said that Maskell had admitted to him that the allegations were true. Out of the 156 clergy abusers in the AG report, Father Joseph Maskell has to be among the worst of them and probably one of the most prolific. He victimized dozens of children that we know of over the course of his 30 or so years as a priest, and it seems highly likely that he preyed on more victims when he went to Ireland to work as a psychologist. Despite his lifetime of abusing children, Maskell died in 2001 without ever having been charged with a crime. Magnus died in 1988, also before justice could catch up to him. As for the big question of whether Maskell was involved in the murder of Sister Kathy, my personal belief is yes. I believe Weiner. There may not be any physical evidence implicating Maskell, but her account makes it hard to believe that he wasn't a part of it. The public release of the AG report in 2023 is a big achievement, and an enormous amount of credit belongs to Jean Weiner, Teresa Lancaster, and many others who worked hard to make it happen. Lancaster is also a Keogh victim who joined Weiner in 1994 as they filed a $40 million lawsuit against the Archdiocese. The case was dismissed on the grounds of the statute of limitations having expired, but that defeat eventually led to a huge victory less than a week after the AG report was released. Maryland Governor Wes Moore signed the Child Victims Act, which eliminates the statute of limitations on civil lawsuits like the one that Weiner and Lancaster filed in 1994. Right before the Child Victims Act was passed, the Archdiocese of Baltimore filed for bankruptcy. It was a shiesty move that forced all victims of abuse to sue the church in bankruptcy court by the end of May 2024. Anyone who was abused by Baltimore priests before the bankruptcy and failed to sue by the deadline is now, unfortunately, out of luck. It seems the murder case of Sister Kathy Cesnik is unlikely to be solved anytime soon, but it's still an open case nonetheless. Maskell's body was exhumed in December of 2023 with the hopes of discovering DNA evidence that could not be obtained in 1969.
Hello, everyone. I'm Vic Carter.
And I'm Denise Koch, and here's what people are talking about tonight. A major development in the murder case of a young Baltimore nun. Nearly 50 years ago, the body of Sister Kathy Cesnik was found in a ditch. Now, for months, we have been investigating this case that has haunted the community. Tonight, a WJZ exclusive, Baltimore County Police have dug up the body of a powerful priest long suspected in Sister Kathy's death to get his DNA. January 1970, the decomposed body of 26-year-old Sister Kathy Cesnik is discovered in a field in Lansdowne. A recent WJZ investigation reveals Sister Kathy was about to blow the whistle on widespread sexual abuse at the hands of Father Joseph Maskell at Archbishop Keough High School. Nearly 50 years later, police are now focusing on that powerful priest.
Maskell was a suspect in the murder of Sister Kathy.
Many of Maskell's victims, including Teresa Lancaster, have told WJZ they went to Sister Kathy, telling her about Maskell's abuse right before she was killed.
She confronted him, and she lost her life for it.
When WJZ first began investigating the murder of Sister Kathy, we discovered Baltimore County Police were once again conducting interviews in the case. What's more, the Baltimore County State's Attorney's Office authorized police to dig up the body of Father Maskell, who died in 2001. They have taken his DNA. And although there's very little physical evidence left to compare it to, they're hoping, as are so many others, this might help answer the question, who killed Sister Kathy?
We've been looking at this case intensely for a while, and there was absolutely no question that in leaving no stone unturned, looking at Maskell's DNA and comparing it to that physical evidence was absolutely something that we had to do.
Now, police tell WJZ it will take 4 to 6 weeks before they know if Maskell's DNA matches the evidence. Maskell denied the accusations against him until his death in 2001. WJZ will continue to investigate this story. We will bring you every development.
Shockingly, no match to him was made. In a certain way, I believe Sister Kathy did keep her promise to Wayner when she was a teenage girl at Archbishop Keough. Even in death, Sister Kathy is helping to draw attention to the crimes committed against children by priests and other clergy members. Netflix picked the story up, the case is on YouTube now, and people like you, the viewer, are learning about it. It may have taken decades for the Archdiocese of Baltimore to acknowledge the rampant abuse in their churches and schools, but hopefully they will work to prevent future abuse and immediately hand CSAs and PDF files over to the authorities. After all, that would be the Christian thing to do. My deepest sympathies go out to all of the victims in this horrifying tale. Rest in peace to Sister Catherine Cesnik, the nun who knew too much. Thank you all for watching. And as usual, if you're a fan of urban legends, folklore, unsolved mysteries, cold cases, and all things mysterious, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel.